idea what time it is down and under, but it is time for Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. So I hope you have your tinfoil hat all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mecky.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave
and Mecky
on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, where it's more than just radio. So jump into the chat room if you can. Now, this is show number 284. Pause for Mecky.
480 and 200.
It's on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. If you missed it, Solaris' show with Sarah Adams and Taj Gill, who's a Revolution Radio host on Sunday nights. They were talking about spirituality, mind control, and transhumanism. Sort of a segue there to tonight's topic. It only costs $5 a month to access the Freedom Slips archives and check out her shows and all the other hosts' shows from Revolution Radio. I subscribe to it. I want access. I want to be able to listen when I want, not also when it goes to air. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. Where I live, it's the Darkinjung people. And where Maggie lives, it's the Daruk people. And we pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and future. Hey, Maggie, welcome aboard.
Hey, what's happening, my friend?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm almost completely over this flu, which is good. You can't hear it in my voice anymore, and I'm not having to cough for about 45 minutes before I go on air, which is also good. And I'll tell you, my abs have never had such a hard workout. I think they call it working your core or something like that. But I wanted to put everyone's, focus everyone's attention on...
Oh, that's your core.
It is the core, right?
That's right.
Mackie, I don't know if you saw it this week, but on August 11th in South America, there was a very strange happening indeed. The ocean, good old predictable ocean, with our sea levels and our mean sea level, which is the 0 point, measured in... Do you know where it's measured, Mecky?
It's measured at a place that is very low.
And a very long time ago, too, by the way. It's measured there. Wherever, I forget where, I was hoping you knew. I think it's in England. It's like Portsmouth or something like that. It was the first sea level measurement. Or it'll fool me and it was in Greenwich. But who knows? Anyway. The sea...
Doubtful. Highly doubtful.
Doubtful. Because Greenwich hasn't got an ocean, right? It's landlocked.
Not really. It pretty much is.
Yeah, landlocked. There you go. What do I know? Okay, so I'm just going to say, in Punta del Este, Uruguay, the ocean receded more than 10 meters, which is 32.8 feet. And it did this in 15 minutes on August 11th, leaving yachts, fishing boats, and even sea lions who could swim. It left them stranded.
Wow.
Right? Meteorologists said that the phenomenon was caused by strong winds coming from the north. However, due to its severity, many people thought it was the sign of a tsunami. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing straight up, right here, right now, on the radio, right now, that if you're on the coastline and the sea recedes, go to high ground.
Run!
That's your code word. Your code word is high ground.
High ground, run. Run.
Yeah.
Run like a person that's chased.
You only have to outrun... Well, actually, you just have to outrun the water. You don't have to outrun the elderly.
It's
Because it's not like there's a predator coming where you just have to be faster than someone else, right?
not going to help anyone if you outrun those.
No. Now, so don't go wandering down onto the new land where the seas receded and go, oh, look at these lovely shells. Look at that fish flapping about. I wonder what it's worried about. Because you won't be worried for too much longer normally. So,
True.
but what was very strange was there was no tsunami. It did that for 3 days.
Oh.
3 days. It returned. The water, actually 2 days I think it is. 1 second. Yeah. The water returned again and went back to normal, if you consider it normal, on the 13th. So that was 2 days. So for 2 days, the ocean was 30 feet less. Hang on. That doesn't happen all the time.
Do we know what happened?
Well, meteorologists said it was the wind. And I think that's really dubious. I think they didn't know what to say. Oh, it's the wind.
It's like
definitely the wind.
It's like when archaeologists say, it's a religious artifact, clearly.
It was a shrine. Yeah, that's a temple, of some religious temple. It's just religious based. Yeah, clearly.
So did you say Argentina?
Uruguay.
Uruguay. Okay, let me just double check. Uruguay. Uruguay. That's a Homer Simpson joke here.
Yes, I know.
Uruguay.
It's probably not.
No, you are. No, it's not appropriate. But Doug, that's fascinating stuff. Normally, like you said, there's it has to be some kind of event. Now, wind can be strong enough to cause it, but it has to be really, really, really strong wind.
So what I've been attempting to do,
such a wind.
What I've been attempting to do is look at the satellite imagery back in time, back to then, to see if there's anything, maybe ocean currents. My thought would be that an ocean current eddy, not, you can call me Eddie, and sorry, I can call you Eddie and you call me Al. Call me Al. I was thinking maybe an eddy formed off the coast or something like that, which reduced the height.
It's possible.
That's the kind of thing that I was looking at.
I think aliens stole our water. That's what aliens stole. No, you're all wrong. Aliens stole our water. That's what happened. Okay.
You'd be familiar. Everyone would be familiar with.
Yeah, that's at Punta
surges, right? A storm surge can lower the pressure that's pushing down on the top of the ocean and therefore sucking up the water to meters above sea level normally. And then when the hurricane or the cyclone or the typhoon crosses a coastline, it brings with it that storm surge. Now, the storm surge can be because the wind is pushing it towards the ocean, and so there's the land, it can't get away. But also there's a bulge beneath the center of the storm. And it's this which is the storm surge. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't anything, and the weather was clement where the issue took place. Now, I think maybe an eddy, maybe something large in the Southern Ocean, but because, Uruguay isn't, down on the tip of South America, I'm sort of, a little lost as to being able to explain it, just like those meteorologists. Yeah, it was a wind. So bundled together, was actually a bit of misinformation with this story, and I had to sift the chaff from the wheat, and I found that bundled with this was a story, while that was on the 11th of August, a story from way back in March about there being tsunamis in South Africa. Well, they'd claimed they were the same day, and that isn't true. That was someone's bad research. And so I can eliminate the South African tsunamis, and this is just an isolated incident on its own. I thought maybe a meteor had hit the ocean that no one knew about. I mean, these things fly past all the time. In fact, there was one flying past today that's 3 miles wide, but its orbit is outside of the moon's orbit, so it's safe this time at least. And I forgot the name of that one too, and I'd even written it down, but I cleaned up and I threw the piece of paper away. But that kind of thing could happen. I mean, it could have been a meteor strike in the ocean, and it could have formed a tsunami going in the other direction, or some direction that we don't have any reporting on, possibly. You know, I mean, it takes a lot to move that much ocean.
Well, you know, what I would like to throw out there, because I've recently read a paper on this. What can happen, this is like way out there, guys. It is scientifically sound, but it's way out there. What can happen if a micro or cluster of micro black holes comes past the Earth, for example? It would have a massive gravitational effect. So if a micro black hole had passed close to the Earth or even within the Earth's atmosphere, which event, if it's just a one, then that kind of thing can happen, or could happen. It could draw the water away from the land, because it's a massive gravitational pull. And having said that, though, if it lasts for more than a few hours, to explain that, or even for a day, if it's over a couple of days, then it becomes difficult to explain with a micro black hole. But if a sufficiently strong gravitational source passes close to the ocean, it can happen. I don't know if you've seen this either, but it could also be a very strong electromagnetic force. And I want you to try this at home. Turn on your tap. It has to be at least 6 or 7 inches of water to see the effect properly. And then get a comb and comb your hair. And hold that comb next to the water. What you will see is that your comb has got a repulsive effect on the water. That's the electromagnetic force pushing against the water, right? So again, a strong enough electromagnetic force can also push water away. So there's a number of possible explanations. I'm not saying it's either of those, but it's a possibility.
Having said that, Mickey, it could have been some kind of test of a weather weapon.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, the pictures, guys, I urge you to look at these pictures of the event. It's like, the water is just not there for literally hundreds of meters. There's just ocean floor. It's hilarious to look at.
I posted it into the chat room.
Good stuff.
It's maybe a little devastating for the fisheries. So if your subsistence is fish, and you'd plan to take your boat out that afternoon, and when you get to the boat is listing and sitting on the now dry ocean bottom, you're not going fishing. No. You're going. What you got to do is mud shoveling. You can go for mud crabs and shovel. Pippies, bring a shovel. That's what you want. Yeah. But look, it's been an interesting week. As nothing has happened, luckily, with North Korea. I myself, I was traveling the entire week. So I left Tuesday morning, came back Friday night. Many delays in between. So I traveled from Sydney to Perth, from Perth to Melbourne, from Melbourne to Brisbane, and then from Brisbane to Sydney. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And to put it in perspective for our listeners, maybe overseas, if you're in the States, that would be, I guess, sort of like New York, Seattle, Dallas, Orlando, LA, yeah, something like that. So it's across the continent as far as you can go, and it's a fairly long. I don't recommend it to anyone. Don't do it. It's just not good for you. The air conditioning really. I don't know if you can hear it, but my voice probably sounds a bit croaky or nasally. That's not because I'm sick. This is the after effects of the airline air conditioning, which I never really take well to in the first instance. But other than that, having said that, it's interesting to see flying
from like flying around Australia, you see the weather everywhere, right? And people tell me, oh, it's unseasonably warm in Perth, for example. They said it's unseasonably warm, and Melbourne was freezing cold. In Brisbane, it was hot. It was 30 degrees. Again, unseasonably so. And people start talking about the weather and climate and all kinds of things. And I like to say, well, you know what? Yeah, well, the weather is what happens every day, right? I thought I did. Sorry, Dave. But the climate is what is what you experience over the course of decades or centuries, and that changes. It just does. Denying climate change is foolish because we know it changes. There was an ice age, for crying out loud. Okay, just to say that again. And human influence on it. Well, I think there's some evidence that some human activity may be related to changes. Of course it is. It's a finely balanced system, guys. We have to appreciate that. And there's now 7-something billion of us, 7.5 billion, right? And that clearly would have an effect, especially if as highly industrialized as we are, especially in third world countries where there's no green laws in third world countries. There's no protection of the environment. There's no EPA. And what EPA? What? No, I need a job. I need to feed my family. You can protect your environment on your time, my friend. Off you go. But that's it. Having said that, and I need to make this point because it's sort of a segue into our topic today. Doesn't mean you can't bring up more news, Dave, but I do need to mention it. Mm-hmm. So I do travel a lot. I do. I travel internationally a lot. I travel here in Australia a lot. For the last 10 years, I've traveled everywhere. I've been in India and China. I've been in Europe. I've been to the States a lot. I've been all over Asia, and to the islands, Fiji, and all that. So I've seen a lot, and I've seen, most importantly, a lot of people. So, and this is today's show is about human timelines and about the accepted development of our species, Homo sapiens, as it were, and our cousins. And I will tell you something that you probably didn't know, because I didn't know and Dave didn't know. But I don't know if we're going to get that today. It's about a new cousin. So I travel a lot. Just on that though, I see a lot of people, and I see there are all kinds of different people in the world, like all kinds of soma types, body types, head shapes, ethnically diverse, racially diverse, and it's amazing. I saw a Fijian man, for example, in Fiji, could have, except for the really dark skin, could have been, in my opinion, a descendant of one of the Greek or Phoenician sailors. He had that face, that classic Greek or even like Minoan facial structure, right? So I think our genetic makeup is a lot more complex, and I think people have strayed much further than we give them credit for. Most of the famous stories that we remember, or that are being told, around the Odyssey, 10 years trying to get home, the voyages of Sinbad, all these famous, sailors, even Gulliver's Travels, which are clearly largely fictional, about these travelings. And with traveling also comes genetic diversity. So you take your genetic material with you, and if you're a sailor that has been at sea for 6 months, you know what you want to do when you get off the ship, right? So I'm not going to talk about that any further. Having said all of that, I have started to question, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, and that's okay.
Here we go.
Just a thought. It's just a thought.
It's just say it. It's going to say it now.
You don't have to
right here.
You don't have to agree with me. That's fine. But it's a thought. Is it possible? And I'll explain to you in a little bit more. Is it possible that we are in fact not all Homo sapiens? Yes, we're all human, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we're not all necessarily Homo sapiens. So just very quickly, what scientists say the difference between a chimpanzee and us is 99% as far as genetic material is concerned, right? 99%. That's roughly like 1% difference. So 99% is the same. 1% is different. When you look at a yeast, the difference is more like 75%, right? So the further away you move from that, the greater the divergence. But what about the difference between us within our species? What is the genetic variation? Because we don't all look the same. So clearly there must be a percentage difference, and it's probably 0.001 or whatever percent, right, between us. Like to define someone's eye color, hair color, height, or racial, I guess, or ethnic. I mean, bone structures. I mean, the way. I mean, certainly an African American looks different from a Norwegian person, right? So I mean, we have no trouble telling people apart that way. But my question is, how much of a genetic difference is there, right? Is it 0.001%? But I mean, it's negligible, we might say, but it's there. So so bear with me then. If that is true, then and we also know that we still have Neanderthal DNA, we have Denisovian DNA, and we've got a couple of other DNA fragments or DNA strands that are belonging to other human-like species that we no longer have any record for. So we know that we are not purely anything. We have other DNA strands within us. So maybe some have more and some have less. But is it not also possible that what we call Homo sapiens is a very specific thing? While we are all human beings, and I tell you what, if Neanderthal and Denisovian were still around, as well as Homo fiorensis, the little guys, the hobbits, we would classify them as human beings, would we not? I think we would. Because they are human beings. They may not be Homo sapiens, but they're human beings. And people always go a lot by the shape of the skull. Let's stay there for a second with the skull. You've seen very many different peoples, I'm sure yourselves. Luckily these days there's a lot of mixing of people. And most of us have very differently shaped skulls. And it's not just soft tissue. Some of us have very pronounced like rears, like the rear of our heads, like it's
you're right, and Mekki, and some have very pronounced and some have none.
Yeah, some are very flat, have very flat heads, right? And others have very pronounced brow ridges, whereas others have very slight brow ridges. So there's a massive variation in the bone, not the soft tissue. I'm not talking about the soft tissue. The soft tissue could be anything, right?
Let's call it the skull.
The skull, exactly. The actual bone, right? So now, and when I look at all these hominoid, and so forth skulls that are presented in the museums and so forth, I mean, there are quite large differences between them, absolutely. But just by looking at people's heads, I think there are quite large differences within our skull structures, right? And I think people will also find differences in the relative sizes or volume of people's brains, right? Because some people are large, right, and some people are small. I mean, that's just the way they're built. The funny thing is this, though, it's completely irrelevant as far as intelligence is concerned, right? Do you know what I mean? So for example, I'm not picking anyone, but I want to give you an example. Filipino people or even African Bushmen are fairly small. They're small creatures, right? I mean, they're small people on average. They're smaller than, I don't know, a European person with a relatively smaller skull, right? But there's no noticeable difference in their cognitive facilities. Are you with me so far? There's no difference in their cognitive abilities, right? So the relative volume of the brain, unless it's like half or whatever, sure, I give that. But given, 100 mils or 50 mils or whatever in brain volume, I don't think makes much of a difference, to be honest with you. So are we all Homo sapiens? That's my question here. It'll come clear what I mean, or why I asked the question when we go through today's topic. But are we all Homo sapiens?
That is a very good question. Mekki, pardon me, when you mentioned 1.2%, just for everyone out there, I want to let everyone know that that's about 35 million base pairs.
Yeah.
That's what that equates to. 1.2%, 35 million differences. Now, Mekki, the other thing I want to, because, I have an alien connection with us, right? So if I extrapolate downstream to chimps at 1.2% or 98.8% similarity.
Yep.
If we were to encounter a species which was 1.2% different upstream, say visitors or a spaceship arrives and our science boffins decide to do a DNA test on them surreptitiously. Oh, have a drink of water. Thank you for the glass. Oh, and they run off and do a DNA test on them. And we found they were exactly the same proportion of 98.8%.
Yeah.
Are we the kind of people who will talk to a chimp and try and get them to understand quantum theory? Do we talk about our day? Nope. Do we attempt to describe the wheel?
Yeah.
No. We have so few similarities as far as the way we approach things from a thinking perspective that we could assume the same between us and a visiting alien species. Why would they even bother?
Yeah.
You could think about it like that. Let's hope they're like a lot similar. In fact, let's just hope they're us in the future coming back in time or something. I don't know what that is. But if that's the kind of gaps we're talking about, then there is a distinct possibility that we'll never understand any of their concepts. We'll give it a shot. In fact, we just wheel Stephen Hawking's, between us and the aliens and go, look, you deal with them.
Yeah.
Because he's like the planet's smartest guy, right? The wheelchair guy. So wouldn't that make sense, right? To do that. And see where that goes.
But they might just keep him as a pet or in a cage in the zoo.
I do think we'd make great pets.
Oh, look, this one does tricks. He can do long division in his head. No, he can. I'll show you.
He can do a quadratic equation
but
on paper.
Look, Dave is absolutely. That's right, and Dave is 100% correct to raise this point, which is of course one of the contact problems that we would have, because the species, arguably, that comes here, is more advanced than us, and let's say, like Dave said, maybe there's a 1% difference in DNA, or something like that. No, we would not talk to them. They would not talk to us. It's like having a discussion, around, the Zoroastrianism with the chimpanzee. Do you think Ahura Mazda and Ahriman are viable, philosophical counterpoints?
Just as something as simple as the concept, Becky, of I think, therefore I am.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is that something that we could explain and that they could explain back to us and describe the meaning of it?
Well, probably not. I mean, I know we've got a high opinion of ourselves, right? But probably not. So then, again, my original question stays: are we all Homo sapiens? So we know we have other DNA in us from other, now we think extinct members of our family. We think they're extinct. I would say maybe not. Maybe they're not extinct. Certainly some of that DNA lives in within us, but lives on in us. But I think more than that, maybe some of us have much more DNA from someone else than from what we like to call maybe Homo sapiens. I don't know. It's nuts. Now, and Dave, I agree. Let's just have a look at that. So. Well, what this show cycle is about, and we're not going to finish today, not by a long shot. This is about the human timelines, but once we've discussed them, and we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing them, because some interesting, not in boring detail. Actually we will talk about the new species today. That's excellent. We have enough time, and then there's a whole bunch of scientific findings that you probably weren't aware of, pushing back further and further our timeline. We're also going to talk about mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam and what that actually means. We're going to explain to you what that means. the timeline, the human timeline, is being revised all the time. And we're going to talk about these articles here as well. Some really, really interesting articles we found. So let's jump into it then, Dave. I've been holding a talking stick. Why don't you tell us about the timeline of human evolution?
Do you know what? The timeline of human evolution outlines the major events in the development of the human species, Homo sapiens, and the evolution of our ancestors. It includes brief explanations of some of those species, the genera, and the higher ranks of taxa that are seen today as possible ancestors of modern humans. This timeline is based on studies from anthropology, paleontology, developmental biology, morphology, and from anatomical and genetic data. It does not address the origin of life, which discussion is provided by abiogenesis, but presents one possible line of evolutionary descent of species that eventually led to humans. A caution: other than Mr. Haeckel's historic and emblematic tree, this article provides no phylogenetics analysis to help portray the complex, non-linear facts of human evolution. It is important that the possible line of evolutionary descent should not be interpreted as providing a linear progression from very early taxa to presupposed objective of Homo sapiens. No such directed progression is implied.
Now, this is important. Now, this is obviously taken from an official site, and this is an official scientific text. It is very important that there's a disclaimer here. I mean, all of us in school have learned that we have always developed in a pretty much linear way. You know, we come from the apes, and now we're much better. In fact, we're the best. Thank you very much. Now, what they're saying here, no, not quite like that. And I like that, because that's actually what's happening more and more in the scientific community. It is not such a clear-cut way, and it's not such an easily understood tree or evolutionary tree, if you want to call it that, because we are discovering new ancestors and new cousins and new contemporaries all the time, and we push back the advent of Homo sapiens further and further back in time. That actually happens on an ongoing basis, and I maintain, this is my statement here, and Dave, happy for you to agree. I believe that the Homo sapiens, as we, our form, is a lot older than has hitherto been allowed for, to the tune of millions of years, in my opinion. In fact, I also strongly believe there may have been a separate species of us prior to a massive cataclysmic event which killed most of us, and it might even be a different species that was alive after the cataclysmic event. And the old species, which had been inhabiting this planet prior to that, was, at least on this planet, completely destroyed. Possibly survived outside or inside this planet, if you're with me so far. But certainly all the surface dwellers, our potential ancestors, were wiped out to leave the human race to begin anew, as many, many myths have shown us. And in fact, something that mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam seem to also attest to, but we'll get to that. So it's really interesting. Now, go ahead. Sorry, Dave.
So I just want to say, Mackie, you didn't know whether I was going to agree with you. I agree wholeheartedly with your statement, with your position on this. I'm solid. I completely agree, and I still think that there are possibly many more examples of maybe interrelated or interbred species which then became their own line, and then we maybe interbred with them also, which haven't been discovered yet, because we're discovering more and more, and it's continuing, and this continued change of mindset, which Meki's described, and I read out that it's non-linear, also presents itself positively to our way of thinking. The thinking that the Adam and Eve example that Meki gave, the mitochondrial Eve, was, and because of the change in chromosome count, apparently a completely different species. So we'll get to that, but I just want to let Meki know that I am 100% on his side with this one.
I appreciate that, but I know you would, because you're a smart cookie. No, but look, there's a table here, and I would like to just quickly highlight a few things in that table, because it's actually a pretty good table. And there's another timeline which we're going to actually give to you in full, which is more, I guess, around the human evolution specifically. But this table, and I'm going to just run through it very quickly, Dave, and then if you can take the next one and we'll share that. But I don't want to spend too much time on it. So essentially, this is the taxonomy of Homo sapiens from this particular article. The eukaryota, which are cells with a nucleus, are believed to have started 2.1 billion years ago. So that's when the first cells with a nucleus came along. Prokaryotes are, of course, a different order, but we won't talk about those, because we believe we came from eukaryotes, not prokaryotes, because that's eukaryotes had the cells with a nucleus. And then animals, or animalia, showed up about 590 million years ago. Vertebrates, which are called the chordata, showed up about 530 million years ago. Then the vertebrates, about 500 million years ago. Tetrapods, which are animals with 4 limbs, showed up about 395 million years ago. Amniota, 340 million years ago. Then mammals, 220 million years ago. Okay, placental mammals, about 125 million years ago. And then primates, about 80 million years ago, or 75, depending what you're looking at. Then apes, the great apes and the lesser apes, such as gibbons, appeared about, these are called the hominoidae, appeared about 28 million years ago. Then the hominidae, not the hominoidae, the hominidae, which are the great apes, which are the humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, which are the hominids, appeared about 15 million years ago, according to this timeline. Okay, and the homini, which is the genera Homo, Pan, and the Australopithecines, about 5.8 million years ago. Then you've got the hominina, which is the genus Homo, and close human relatives and ancestors, hominins, about 2.5 million years ago. And then the genus Homo arises, which is humans, like Neanderthal and so forth, about 2.5 million years ago. And then archaic humans, right? So again, subgenus Homo, 600,000 years ago, 0.6 of a million. Homo sapiens, which is the anatomically modern human, about 200,000 years ago. And then Homo sapiens sapiens, which is us. And I'm never really clear what the difference between Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens sapiens is, but I'm sure somebody out there can tell me. Now, those guys, or us, were meant to have appeared about 70,000 years ago. So I don't want to
to be sure, Meki.
To be sure, right?
That's what it is.
Right, to be sure. And look, that's the Homo sapiens means the wise man, and so Homo sapiens sapiens must mean the very wise man. Because in Latin, when you repeat a word, that's usually the emphasis. But so just to give you an idea, that's what's actually accepted. And to an earlier point we made as part of the hypothesis, the genus Homo is accepted to have started 2.5 million years ago. 2.5 million years. Okay, that's generally accepted. The species Homo sapiens, which is really us in a way, is accepted to have started 200,000 years ago. So if we focus just on the 200,000 years, our civilization could have arisen, being generous here, 20 times. 20 times. We could have made it from nothing to where we are today. 20 times. Okay?
You know that the Anunnaki was supposed to have begun their gold mining about 2 to 250,000 years ago.
That's a shock, right? That's good. That's
Just saying, right. There's a timeline here that seems to match up with the creation of the species. But, we'll find out more.
And, but this is really not, this is very, I'll tell you, yeah, we will, but that's interesting, and it's an excellent point. I'll tell you why it's a good point, because our findings around the age of Homo sapiens, for example, right? Let's take that, just Homo sapiens as a snapshot, lines up very well with what the Sumerians and Babylonians thought the Anunnaki had done, right? Now, they credited the Anunnaki with the creation of the black-headed ones, us, the human beings, right? Now, they didn't say black people. They said black-headed. Mm-hmm. And if you specifically say black-headed, in my opinion, you're referring to hair color. Okay? You're not referring to skin color. You're referring to hair color. They created people that had black hair. Why would they say black-headed? Why wouldn't they just say black? The black ones. That makes sense. But you don't have a black-headed person with a white body. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
Right? So what makes sense, though, again, just me, right, is that they created black-haired people. Now, we do also know that blonde hair and blue eyes, and I think I've got the exact date for that, but that goes back to a genetic defect I don't know, like 4,000 or 5,000 years maybe ago, right? Like to a single ancestor, which was blue-eyed and blonde-haired. And before that, all of us were of dark complexion with dark hair and so forth. In fact, the vast majority of the human race, or the human races, right, are still black-haired. Black-haired. That's just the general thing, right? So that's the and if you look at where you find blonde hair, truly blonde and blue eyes, it's only very few places on the planet. I mean, it's spread now, obviously, but if you look at the origin of it, right,
and
it's different.
It's ever reducing in genome.
You're correct, because it's a recessive. It's a recessive gene. But not only that. Red-headed people, and I think I've said this before, Dave. I'll say it again though. I'll make a statement here. I'm saying here that people with a very specific kind of complexion and red hair, and you know who I mean, are a specific subspecies as well, or a race of people, right? You've got African people, and you got blonde European people, whatever. I believe that the red-haired, especially with that very specific skin tone, it's a very light skin tone with freckles as well, right? And the red hair and the red eyebrows and so forth, and the red lashes, I do believe they represent a specific human subrace as well, in my opinion. Okay, because nobody has told me yet where they come from. But that's beside the point. So so it's interesting to see that these timelines, like Dave has said, actually line up, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. But Dave, there's this timeline here of the human evolution by John Pickrell. What does he tell us? That's probably more human specific, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to use a term, and it's MYA, and it means million years ago. Just so I don't have to keep saying the words million years ago. MYA. So 55 MYA, the first primitive primates evolve. Then between 8 and 6 million years ago, or MYA, first gorillas evolve, later chimp and human lineages diverge. Then shortly after that, about another 200,000 years, or 5.8 MYA, the Orion to Genesis, oldest human ancestor thought to have walked on 2 legs. That's 5.8 MYA. Yep. Then 5.5 MYA, Ardipithecus, early proto-human, shares traits with chimps and gorillas, and is forest-dwelling. 4 MYA, Australopithecus. So Pithecines appear. They have brains no larger than a chimpanzee's, with a volume around 400 to 500 cubic centimeters, but walk upright on 2 legs. First human ancestors to live on the savannah. Then 3.2 MYA, Lucy, the famous Lucy, not Lucy or Ball, but Lucy, famous specimen of Australopithecus afarensis, lives near what is now Hadar in Ethiopia. 2.7 MYA, Paranthropus, lives in woods and grasslands, has massive jaws for chewing on roots and vegetation, becomes extinct. 1.2 MYA. So once again, very shortly after this, only about 200,000 years, 2.5 MYA, Homo habilis appears. Its face protrudes less than earlier hominids, but retains many ape-like features. Has a brain volume of about 600 cubic centimeters. Mackie?
Absolutely. Now, and Homo habilis is also the species, we believe, of hominids that starts to use stone tools, hence habilis, created by splitting pebbles, like you might have seen them, the shards and so forth, mostly flintstone. And this starts all the one tradition of tool making, which lasts a million years. Some hominids also develop a meat-rich diet as scavengers. The extra energy may have favored the evolution of larger brains, not brains. And that's actually interesting. Blains, give me your blains. No, I do apologize for my voice today, but it's interesting, and it's also important to understand that our ancestors, or the hominids that are supposed to be our ancestors, were in fact scavengers. They weren't the fearless hunters that they're portrayed to be. They're much more likely to have scavenged of the actual predators, like such as saber-toothed tiger, and in those days, they had the megafauna as well. So saber-tooth was one of the smaller ones, I guess. But bears, massive bears, and all these creatures existed at that time as well. So now we go to 2 MYA, and we have evidence of Homo ergaster, another branch on our tree, with a brain volume of up to 850 cubic centimeters. So slightly more than half. Around half what we spot today on average. 1.8 to 1.5 Homo erectus is found in Asia, and we believe this to be the first true hunter-gatherer, and also the first to have migrated out of Africa in large numbers. And this particular ancestor has a brain size of around 1,000 cubic centimeters. 1.6 MYA. Possible first sporadic use of fire, suggested by discolored sediments in Kubifora in Kenya. More convincing evidence of charred wood and stone tools is found in Israel and dated to 780,000 years ago. More complex Acheulean stone tools start to be produced in other dominant technology until 100,000 years ago. Now we're starting to leave the millions of years, and we're going to the 600 or the 100,000. This is 600,000 years ago. 600,000 years ago, Homo heidelbergensis lives in Africa and Europe. Similar brain capacity to modern humans. Let me repeat that. 600,000 years ago, similar brain capacity to modern humans. 500,000 years ago, earliest evidence of purpose-built shelters, wooden huts. And those are known from sites near Chichibu in Japan. Now, if they are in Chichibu in Japan, which is an island, you can be pretty sure they were elsewhere as well. 400,000 years ago, again, we believe that this is the time our ancestors began to hunt with spears. 325,000 years ago, this is something I'm going to disagree with, oldest surviving early human footprints are left by 3 people who scrambled down the slopes of a volcano in Italy. Now, we have Now, human footprints, they're saying here, right? Now, we have evidence, hard evidence, for much older footprints. And Dave and I have brought this up many times before. There is a site which is acknowledged by science, and it's acknowledged as being a problem. But not because they're human-like footprints or human footprints there. That's that. They don't talk about that. The problem is with the number of species being present at the same time that shouldn't be present at the same time. That's the problem, right? Forget the human footprints. That's a massive problem. Okay, so so I'm going to disagree with that particular one. 280,000 years ago, first complex stone blades and grinding stones. 230,000 years ago, Neanderthals appear and are found across Europe, from Britain in the west to Iran in the east, which is actually quite a spread. So we should assume they probably came around much earlier and just, they were spread out at that point, until they become extinct, supposedly with the advent of us, some 28,000 years ago. Again, sorry, before I go on, I need to say something. This is around what we find and where we find it. Most of the things we find by we haven't dug in, and we're digging in the wrong places. And a lot of the stuff that we would be digging for has probably been destroyed. Sea levels have risen, rivers have changed course, volcanic eruptions have happened, mountains have risen, and other mountains have sunk into the sea. So I think, apart from the changes to the face of the planet, geologically speaking, we would have lost a lot of evidence as well. And please do bear in mind that all fossils are marine fossils. Marine fossils, meaning ocean fossils. On land, the fossilization process is an extremely difficult undertaking. If you leave a body in the savannah, in the desert, I don't care where you leave that body, into the elements with predators around, chances are there will be no fossils. And I'll tell you why. First of all, the elements, of course, elements will, the rotting and so forth. But if there are predators or worms or beetles or whatever,
microbes,
they will crack open microbes. They will crack open the bones, and you will be reduced to nothing after a while. You will be reduced to nothing. And who knows? Maybe those high civilizations in the past burned their dead. Maybe that's what they did. Maybe cremation was a thing. Right? Maybe that's what they did. And sorry, IBM 0111. Magma, yes, of course. I mean, magma flows over the earth, like you see, it burns everything. It's just gone, whoosh, gone. So it's important to understand that we may not have all the evidence. Okay, now,
Mekki, I'm just going to pause you there just 1 sec. We've got 5 minutes to the top of the hour.
Oh, okay.
What I wanted to say right here, right now, right on radio, was that if fossilization occurred commonly, the forests would be filled with bones. There'd be bones everywhere. You couldn't walk anywhere without crunching on a dead animal, right?
That's right.
It'd be built up so high that you couldn't enter the forest. Thinking about where you live, wherever that is, how many creatures that have bones that, get around? There's very few land-living creatures that don't have bones. So they'd all still be there. You'd be able to just put your hand into the topsoil and pick up some fossils. Oh, actually, just some bones. But because it's so rare, and the only way to make a fossil is to prohibit oxygen from contacting the remains.
Yep.
Because oxygen, while it keeps us alive, is terrible for our remains. It actually assists in the breakdown of all of you, and then you become food for the worms, as Mekki said. The microbes and the predators will scatter your bones around. The only way to do it is to maybe have a disaster, a cataclysm, where maybe it rained and your remains were immediately covered with a fine silt.
Yeah. That's
right?
exactly it.
Submerging that in there, it's going to pretty much leach the minerals from the surrounding soil and replace your cells sort of structure and create a fossil. That's the only way to do it. There isn't any other way. It's the low oxygen environment, and that's the way to do it. So as Meki said, the majority of fossils are marine fossils. That's true, because there are places, even in the ocean, where there is no oxygen. And if you haven't seen those videos of sea creatures dying in a pool of no oxygenated water, they suffocate and then they perish and their carcass remains. I've seen it, Meki. It looks awesome. Even on the bottom of the ocean, there's heavy brine, low oxygen water there. So look, it's completely possible. It's unlikely that you'd become a fossil if you up and died in a forest. So that's the reason why they're not teeming with life. That's the reason why it's so difficult and fortunate. Maybe it's like winning lotto, how rare it is to find a fossil of a human fossil going back so far. It's just so unlikely to be created in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. This is exactly right. I mean, you have to understand this, guys. So we'll continue the list here, and we'll get to the nitty-gritty in a second. But we're not going to start that because the music should start any moment. But it is important to understand that we're like, okay, we've got a whole library. There's a library with 1 million books. That's what we have. The light is out, okay, and there was a fire that went through the library. It burned 999,000 books. Okay, and it doesn't burn them completely. So there's some fragments of each book left, somewhere here, there, and everywhere. Some books are completely burned. And what we are doing, we're blind, by the way. We're blind. We're going in this library, and we're looking around, and we're finding a bit of ash here and a bit of ash there, and we find, oh, there's been a writing on this piece of ash. Woo! Sweet! We've uncovered the secret of the ages. That's what we're doing when we're digging for evidence. Don't go away, and try to donate if you can.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Dave and Mekki's Shiny Side Out. That's right, Shiny Side Out. Just in case you've fallen asleep there. And this is show number 284, 480, and 200. We're talking about human timelines, human evolution, all kinds of human things. In fact, are we all humans? Are we all humans or are we not? I mean, that's a good question. Think about it, right? Because, I mean, have we tested everybody on the planet? Not yet. No, we haven't. And would we tell everybody what the results were?
Never.
I think we would not, right? I don't think
agree.
so. I really don't think so. Right? Anyway, so anywho, let's get cracking, my dear friend. Yes, we're talking about Homo sapiens. Now, 195,000 years ago, and we discussed earlier, how difficult it is to get fossils created. Our own species, Homo sapiens, appears on the scene. And shortly thereafter begins to migrate across Asia and Europe. When we say shortly, we'll talk 1,000 years, obviously. The most modern human remains are 2 skulls found in Ethiopia that date to this period. The average human brain volume is 1,350 cubic centimeters. That's where we are today, thereabouts. That's it. 2 skulls. That's it. Not a settlement, not a village, not full skeletons. 2 skulls. I'm not going to go into too much depth around what the problems are here, and the leakies and all that stuff. Of course you want to be known as the person that found the oldest human skull. Of course you do. We have found older human remains. Well, sorry. When I say we, I'm talking about the great unwashed, the non-scientific community, right? The people, the miners, for example, right? And again, you will say, hey, Mackie, and Dave made a very good point. Why don't we find that today anymore, man? I mean, we mine a lot more than we ever did before. That is very true. You're 100% correct. But the way we mine today, and I invite you to go to those mine sites, is by grinding up everything, mostly by machines. Human miners, while they still exist, are no longer the pickaxe and shovel kind. Okay, they operate machinery which grinds to bits anything that you might find. And I'm not saying that nothing is being found, but then again, would they tell us? Probably not. Why? Because it would shut the mine down. But
I was advised, Mackie, that there is stuff found all the time, but they just grind it. They don't care.
See?
It's not their job to find fossils, they said.
No, it's not. In fact, so miners are very safety conscious, and that's a good thing, So death on a mine site is a horrible thing for many reasons, but mostly because you have to shut the mine site down for a long time, which means millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars are lost. In fact, most miners these days are going toward the full automation of mine sites, right? I mean, there are no longer any people on site at all, except maybe for some controllers. But all the trucks, all the machinery is self-operated, self-driven, or remote controlled, either way, right? So that's where it's going. So that's why, like Dave just said, I mean, he has got some contacts, and Dave told him, well, this is what happens. But even if they could even claim ignorance, because, well, you know what, we grind up stuff anyway, because we no longer have a pickaxe and a shovel. Or, and even back in the day when we dynamited things, I mean, there'd be sections that used to be dynamited, and then people would go in and go through the stuff. That's what would happen, right? People would be involved, and people find things. A truck doesn't find things. A shoveling machine doesn't find things. People do. But people are no longer part of that. So that's why, and so we did find these things back in the 19th century when mining was still a very dangerous and very manual trade. Okay? And are they beyond doubt? No, they're not. But I find it very difficult. This is just me again, right? And I know people will hate me for it, and scientific method this, and Occam's razor that, and that's all good, right? But there are 2 skulls that were found in Ethiopia at that period, that date to that period. That's it. That's it. And just in this particular space, I mean, that was such a lucky thing to find. Don't you think? Dave, I mean, we've spoken about this before. Let me give you an example of what I mean here, because I might sound a little obscure. Do you remember the mechanism of Antikythera? I'm sure you do. This was a sophisticated star computer, as we know now, that is about 2,000 years old, right? Give or take, right? And that particular sophisticated star computer sank to the bottom of the Aegean Sea, right? In the Mediterranean, gone. And near the island, in fact, of Antikythera, which is Greek. 2,000 years later, some sponge divers find the shipwreck and bring up a whole bunch of vases and artifacts. And for the longest time, this little artifact is completely forgotten. It looks like a rusty bronze thing. Who cares? with the advent of X-ray and the inquisitive mind of a couple of scientists, they do X-ray this device and they discover it is a very sophisticated star computer. What are the chances? Again, this is my statistical question to you guys. What are the chances of finding the only existing star computer of the ancient world that went down in a storm by chance and then is found again 2,000 years later by sponge divers? What do you think the odds are of that? The only existing one. Because that's what they say. Oh, no, it's a prototype, you see. Guys, there's no way we would have found the odds. You know, the sponge divers should have played Lotto every day for the rest of their lives. That's what they should have done. Because it is such an unlikely, statistically speaking, event. Not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's highly unlikely. Right? So therefore, those star computers must have been in common use. If we find someone by chance in a shipwreck, there must have been many of them. But we have no evidence of a workshop anywhere. We have no evidence of them. They're not described anywhere, right? And you know what? If you write a novel today, would you talk about the GPS system necessarily? No, probably not. You probably wouldn't.
Why? Because it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. We already just take it for granted anyway.
Yeah, bingo, right? That's just what would happen, and it's just one of those things. Oh no, everybody, every captain has one of these things. I mean, you wouldn't sail without it. Are you stupid? So
wait till
let's go back to the two skulls.
Wait for this, Becky. Wait till there's driverless cars. So when you get in the car, you won't write about the driving. People rarely write about their driving experience. I got in the car. I turned the key. I depressed the steering wheel, the accelerator, and the car moved forward. It was such a surprise. No one does that. It's a given, and we take it for granted, and there you go, and that's it.
But that's a good point. So let's go back to our two skulls here that were found in Ethiopia. So two skulls were found. That's awesome. That's great. I mean, such a lucky find. We already found out that it's very difficult to have fossils manifest. Very difficult, but there they are. They're two skulls, not skeletons, not a settlement, just two skulls. And they were dated to that period. Now, we've spoken about the problem with the dating methods. Now, for the skulls, of course, they used radiocarbon dating. But for the artifacts that were found in these mines, they used relative dating because carbon dating didn't exist. So, which one is the more accurate? It's hard to say because there are drawbacks for any dating method. But in the relative dating method, where it's found in a certain layer of the Earth, we know it was fairly far down. So we can assume that it was there for a long, long time potentially, right? And then sediments would heap on top of the next layer and so on and so forth until hundreds of millions of years passed. But with the skulls, well, if the radiation had remained the same, if the solar radiation or any in fact space, the radiation we get from space, that had all remained constant over the last 200 years because we know the half-life of the C14 atom. Right? We do know that to more or less accuracy. So, but to just find those two skulls is such a lucky thing. Therefore, I propose here many more fossils were lost. Many, and I believe also much older fossils. And then we go, Becky, but we know that can't be because they evolved from each other, blah blah blah. Well, let's take a step back and look what we know. We know that we're contemporary with the gorilla, we're contemporary with the orangutan, we're also contemporary with the chimpanzee and the bonobo. So these are 4 great apes, and they're living with us on this planet right now. Right now. Now they shouldn't be, right?
And for how long will they still be going?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, they might become extinct pretty soon, right? So, but the point is, we are coexisting. So why couldn't Homo sapiens, or whoever we are anyway, have coexisted with Neanderthal? We know they did. Okay. Why couldn't they have coexisted with Homo erectus or Homo habilis? Right? Why not? Or Homo australopithecus? Why not? Why not? Is that such an amazing thing? Dave, to jump, but we spoke to Lloyd Pye,
That's right.
and he had a very interesting point. I want to quickly wait and this. They are today, most likely, large hominids. Hominids, I think. Or what did he say? Hominoids. I always get the two mixed up. I don't want to do him injustice by saying the wrong thing. So if any mistake, it's entirely mine. It's not Lloyd Pye's mistake. It's my mistake. Okay. I want to probably hominoids actually, not hominids. Anyway, so but such as Yeti, such as Sasquatch, such as Bigfoot. I think again, okay, the evidence is anecdotal. I know that, and we haven't got any physical hard evidence, or at least not enough. I think, but I think there's enough anecdotal evidence to point us to a semi-conclusion that these creatures might exist. And they are in fact the true evolutionary descendants of Homo erectus and so forth, right? The Homo giganticus, the massive human, Gigantopithecus, I think it was. But the point is that he believed that they followed that evolutionary path, if there was one, right? And they are in fact the actual original species of the planet. The Sasquatch, the Yeti, and so forth. We are intruders, interlopers, domesticated great apes, if you will, for various reasons. In fact, I would go further in saying we predate most of those hominids and hominoids in our present form. I know there are a lot of haters which want, I get it, I understand. I'm talking out of school. I'm not a accredited scientist, what do I know? But it stands to reason. And the answer, and again, I come back, and I'm sorry I'm ranging far afield with this. Sharks have been around for hundreds of millions of years. Sort of crocodiles, and they're my favorite examples here for this. They are still sharks, and they're still crocodiles, because they have pretty much developed or adapted to their perfect form. A shark doesn't have to grow tentacles. A crocodile doesn't have to grow wings, if you go with evolution or adaptation for a second, because they're perfect and they're where they are. They're in their niche. They don't have to. They change in size, sure, but the change in size is usually due to a food source scarcity, things like that, or maybe the disappearance of larger predators yet, so they don't have to be as big anymore. So their size adapts to the new environment, but they're not turning into butterflies, right? They're still sharks and crocodiles. And like I said, yeah, but in their present form, like in very minor changes, they have remained crocodile and shark for hundreds of millions of years. Right? Now, why is it so hard to make the leap and think about us, Homo sapiens, as having remained in this particular form for such a long time? Okay? Why would we do any more? I mean, the thing is this, guys. We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. We're not the most nimble. Like physically, we will lose a fight with chimpanzees from limb. I don't care if you go to the gym every day. I don't care if you know Aikido. I don't care. These creatures are strong. Every animal out there is stronger than us, more fierce than us. What we have is between our ears. We're smart. We think. We build civilization. We build tools. We do all these wonderful things which we think are great, right? And in fact, without civilization, we're pretty hard pressed to survive. Unless we have all of this around us, like a functioning civilization, we are not the top of the food chain. We're not. We're scavengers. Okay? And we respect any, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but any tribal society out there in the world that lives in the jungles, in the mountains, in the deserts, does so in harmony with nature, does so with the greatest respect for nature. Does so with the greatest respect for predators that live in their environments. City dwelling, domestication that we have can completely ignore all of that. It's not sport to go hunting with a gun. That's not sport. What chance does a lion or an elephant have against you if you carry like a 50 caliber gun? None.
From 2 miles away, none.
Exactly, none, zero. Come on, guys. Oh yeah, we're at the top of the food chain. Okay, tell you what, I'll give you a knife. Take a knife as big as you want. Go out into the wild and see how you fare. Even in Australia, where we don't have any large apex predators, we just don't, right? At least not that we know of. Exposure would kill you. Exposure would kill you if you're not fully prepared. So let's be clear and understand where we sit in the food chain. In fact, bacteria are on top of the food chain of us because we are their food. Okay? We are food for bacteria and for viruses. So my point here is that our weak constitution, as it were, indicates that we have lived a civilized life for a long time. I mean, childbirth is difficult for a lot of women. Infection in childbirth killed us. Many women died in childbirth because of infection. Civilization, we couldn't get started until we developed, effective antibiotics, penicillin, things like that, right? I mean, because it was just such a high mortality rate. People didn't live very long because of diseases. Diseases are the apex predators, really, if you think about it, right?
200 years ago is all that was.
Exactly, and we're quickly going there again with the resistant bugs. But so my point is, everything I see in us as human beings is weakness. Physically, I'm talking physically is weakness. Okay. Now, of course, some of us are really strong in survivor types and so forth. I'm not saying that's not so, but the vast majority of us just don't have those traits. So I think that we were used to this kind of life for a long, long time. And then, so once in a while, the civilization would collapse, and then we come back, and all of a sudden, everything feels comfortable again. Because this is a comfortable life. You don't have to worry about it. Indoor plumbing, hooray. Let's get on with our list, though. So that brings me to 170,000 years ago. And this is when mitochondrial Eve may have been living in Africa, which is sort of a direct ancestor to all living people today, sort of, and we'll explain what that means. And then 150,000 years ago, humans became capable of speech. 100,000-year-old shell jewelry suggests that people develop complex speech and symbolism. I don't know how that leap was made. I don't know. But if the brain volume was what it was 600,000 years ago with Homo heidelbergensis, so 400,000 years before that, or well, actually 450. Dave, I don't know, and I haven't seen anything that convinces me that this research around speech is accurate. But please take it along.
Okay, so 150,000 years ago, humans possibly capable of speech. 100,000 year old shell. You said that one. Shell jewelry. That's right. My bad. So 140,000 years ago, first evidence of long distance trade. Trade amongst peoples, usually by boat. 110,000 years ago, earliest beads made from ostrich eggshells and jewelry. The reason why the ostrich, because it's very thick and it's workable. You can work it very easily. 50,000 years ago, this is called the Great Leap Forward. Human culture starts to change much more rapidly than before. People begin burying their dead ritually. create clothes from animal hides, and develop complex hunting techniques, such as pit traps. Well, Meki, the recent date, this needs to be refreshed because we've recently found 80,000-year-old human remains in Australia.
Yep.
And
That's right.
I dare say that the clothing may go back a lot further. The clothing of wearing animal hides. This is just when they've discovered them with the dead, I suspect, and as far back concretely that they can go back. Also, colonization of Australia by modern humans. Well, we can take that back to 80,000. 33,000 years ago, oldest cave art. That's in France. The later Stone Age artisans create the spectacular murals at Lascaux in Chevet in France.
So,
Homo erectus
what's
dies.
that?
What is it, Meki?
Dies out in Asia.
So Homo erectus dies out in Asia, replaced by modern man. 18,000 years ago, Homo florensis, or the Hobbit people, as Meki's mentioned earlier, found on the Indonesian island of Flores. They stand just over 1 meter tall and have brains similar in size to chimpanzees, yet have advanced stone tools. There's another point that Meki made as well. Brain capacity, skull cranium size, while oddly enough they describe it as being the thing that makes humans, but here they say they've found advanced tools. A chimpanzee's cranial size is much smaller, so you could say that could go back to 500,000 or 600,000 years ago instead of limiting it to just when they found some shards. We don't know. I mean, honestly, right today, you're alone in the forest, you need to do something, you're going to pick up a rock and do it. Well, you're going to try and find some tool. You'll try and find a tool to do it. And we know that chimpanzees use tools. They use sticks to prod into holes to get honey and things like that. We didn't show them, they just do it. Okay, so I think that's really important. 12,000 years ago, modern people reached the Americas. Well, that's also under contention as well.
Yep.
It looks like it might be 100,000 years ago. Because who built the mounds?
Exactly.
The extinction, this was the 12,000 years ago, just to let everyone know, was tied to the extinction of the mammoth. That's about the same period in time. They said the extinction of the mammoth was because they were delicious. We ate them all as humans. Just like in New Zealand, there was a giant bird, a flightless bird, rather like the ostrich and the emu. However, it was delicious, and they ate them all about 700 years ago, shortly after arriving in New Zealand, which was only populated around about 700 years ago. So instantly, the KFC brand of large flightless birds reached their entire population and they were all eaten. Okay, so the 12,000 years ago,
right?
12,000 years ago, populating the US with humans, I actually have to say I don't agree with that one. I think it's more like 100,000 if 150. Agriculture, 10,000 years ago, develops and spreads. First villages, starting to make towns, possible domestication of dogs. 5,500 years ago, Stone Age ends, Bronze Age begins. Humans begin to smelt and work copper and tin and use them in place of stone implements. Because that's what bronze is. Copper and tin.
Yeah.
Only 500 years later, writing that we've found. 4,000 to 3,500 years ago, the Sumerians of Mesopotamia developed the world's first civilization.
Yeah.
Wow. Sumeria. I like how it's still mentioned. I like how it's mentioned. That was just the civilization was just sprung out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. But of course, if you delve into the Sumerian culture, you'll find there was a interventionism, which was more likely the cause. And when you find out what the cause is, you find out that goes back at least 250,000 years.
Yeah, and look, that's exactly right. So just in the chat room very quickly, the dodo was native to to Madagascar, and the dodo became extinct because of goats. Now, people believe that the dodo was eaten, but we have found now that the dodo was actually completely inedible. It was the competition with introduced species that killed the dodo. The moa, though, apparently was
that's it. The moa.
Yep. Yeah, this is IBM 0111. Thank you very much, IBM.
Thank you.
Was in fact apparently much tastier, and that is quite possible. That because it was a big, slow moving bird.
A flightless ground dwelling bird.
Now that makes that makes absolutely no sense. If you can't fly, that is. So now this is what is more or less accepted these days. And I mentioned a couple of items that probably would have to be revised in this particular list, but that's what's accepted. But with Homo florensis, or Floresiensis, the hobbit people found in Indonesia on the island of Flores, and hence Floresiensis, have brains that are similar in size to chimpanzees. They are part of the human family. 80,000 years ago, part of the human family. So all of a sudden, stories about the little people, hobbits, things like that, are not as far-fetched as we once might have thought. And David and I have always maintained that different human species are coexistent with us, and they're doing well hiding from us, obviously, because we haven't got the best track record in accepting diversity, even within ourselves, right? Oh, you know what the difference was between the Hutus and the Tutsis in the Rwandan catastrophe? Height. One tribe was shorter on average than the other. So how many wrongly heighted Tutsis and Hutus met their end? I don't know. But that's how insane it has become. It was height. They were Africans, both of them. There was a height difference anyway. So the point here, though, is that the brains of this chimpanzee's brain, I think the quality of the brain is important, not the size. And by that I mean the structure of the neurons. So our neurons can make 5 connections. They're quite adept at being quite. Actually, it's quite plastic. Or it's called plasticity of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
In young, especially, they can form new connections.
Neuroplasticity.
Yeah. Correct. That's exactly right. So it is important to understand just how a brain functions. And in my opinion, the size of the brain is not as important as how it's being used. I know we make the same argument for other organs, but in this particular instance, it's very important. Why? Because brain size in the Homo strand of creatures, hominids, hominoids, and so forth, going right back to Homo habilis, which is about the same brain size as chimpanzees, might be fundamentally different. The main difference between the great apes, for example, and maybe the hominids forth, might have been the way their brains work. They could make connections, how easily these neural pathways formed, how easily they could learn and remember all of these things. And today we don't even really know how the brain functions. Dave and I did a show cycle on the brain as maybe a quantum entity, the quantum mind. Right? It makes sense. There are a lot of indications as to why that should make sense. So it's important to understand that brain size may not be the end all be all of it all. Because don't forget, Neanderthal had a much larger brain than us on average. That didn't do them too well. They seem to be gone. So it's important to get that. Now, we've got another, this is actually a very interesting table. And this is a comparative table. And I want to go through some of these. I think I'll take 3, then Dave takes whatever 3 he wants, and we'll do it that way. But this is giving you an idea of what these folks looks like. I'm sorry if my volume gets as close to the microphone as I can get. Maybe I can pick up my feet. Hope this is better. So I'm going to quickly tell you what this looks like. So the species, it starts with Homo habilis on this table, and the habitat we think was Africa. They were between 110 and 140 centimeters tall, so a fairly short human being. They weighed between 33 and 55 kilos, and their brain capacity went up to 660 cubic centimeters. And there are quite a few sites where we find them. Homo erectus is the next one. He actually was our height, and he ran around Africa and Eurasia. He weighed on average around 60 kilos, and brain capacity ranged from 850 to 1100 cubic centimeters, which is again very similar to us. And again, many sites where they were found. The next one is the Homo urolfensis, okay, but not sure about that particular species. And we know that the capacity of their brain was 700 cubic centimeters, and there are only 2 sites that were found. Dave?
Yeah, so this is Gortengensis, which was only about 3 feet 3 inches. I think it's not 100 centimeters. I think it's 1,000 centimeters. And they were found in South Africa. But that is the habilis range, like an offshoot of them, and that actually renders them pretty darn short, diminutive. You know, it might be that they were within their, obviously they survived, so they had a food source that suited them. They didn't require the height, and I think that's all very important parts to note. But they're only working all of this out on 3 individuals.
Exactly.
So this happens all the time. Meki said before that only 2 skulls were found for one of these. The Rudolfensis was 2 sites where they found samples. But you've got to let's keep going. So still under the habilis, this is the Ugasta, or Urugasta, also classified as the Habilis erectus. And we don't have a height. No body was found. Clearly a skull was the only thing that was found. And that was Eastern and Southern Africa. But that's been found in lots of places, many places. And the antecessor, another Habilis, was 175 centimeters. In fact, I think that's 5'9". I'm 5'10", getting shorter by the minute. So, because I'm 50. So that's it. And they weighed around about between 90 and 200 pounds, 90 kilos, which were around about 200 pounds. Thinking about that, Meki, that's pretty much, my weight and height.
I know. Yeah, well,
if I was to meet one of these, and they were found in Spain, by the way, I'd say that's modern human. That's modern human capacity. It's modern human size. But because they're not sapiens, we don't know. We don't have the ability to find out how strong they are. As Meki mentioned earlier, the chimpanzee is like 7 times stronger or something, some ridiculous number like that, where while a chimpanzee looks frail, they can tear you limb from limb. They can tear your arm off. It's like a Wookiee.
Yeah, that's right.
But they're
Small, angry Wookiee.
but they're also diminutive. They're also much stronger. So just thinking about how that might work for you when you're thinking about it, when you're piecing this together, when you're doing the research. What's the next one, Mickey?
So now there's a few here mentioned, and I want to focus on the main ones. Homo heidelbergensis, we mentioned that particular ancestor. Again, it's 180 centimeters, right? It's about my height, a little bit shorter than me. 90 kilos on average, and the brain capacity of 11 to 1400 cubic centimeters. Clearly, what we have today. In fact, more than we have today on average. And again, we found them in quite a number of sites. Then, of course, the most famous is Homo neanderthalensis, or Neanderthal, found, in fact, in the Neanderthal, which is the Neander Valley in Germany for the first time, and he was around in or her, Europe and Western Asia as well. Ever 70 centimeters. Again, Dave, that's shorter than you. Average weight was between 50 and 70 kilos, but heavily built, so a fairly strong frame and strong muscles. Brain capacity, a whopping 1200 to 1900 cubic centimeters. So much greater capacity than us. They also buried their dead. They used red ochre, they used bear skulls in the graves. Okay, so not really primitive cave dwellers that, or we like to portray them as such. And there have been quite a few sites where they have been found. There's a few more interesting ones. There's, I guess, the Homo rhodensiensis, which was also classified as the heidelbergensis, which was found in Zambia, rather, 1300 cubic centimeters. There's the Homo saichangensis, which we'll talk about in a second, found in Taiwan, and only one individual. And then, of course, Homo sapiens, which is us. Well, apparently from 150 to 190 centimeters. I'm sure they're taller ones. Again, the weight is no longer true. I think we've cracked the 300 kilo mark, and our cranial capacity ranges. Now listen to this. It ranges from 950 to 1800 cubic centimeters. That's a massive range. It's a massive range. So how could we possibly say that Homo ergaster at 850 or Homo antecessor or Homo heidelbergensis at an average of 1100 to 1400 could or would be any more primitive than we are? Or Homo erectus, who went up to 1100, which is right in the mid-range for us. Okay, and people with the largest cranial capacity are not always the smartest either. So your brain size does not equate to genius, I'm sorry to say. So if you've got a big head and you thought, well, my redeeming feature is that I'm a genius, I'm afraid that's not true.
Or brain the size of a planet.
I love that one, absolutely. The three final ones are the ones we've discussed at length. There's Homo floresiensis. Again, this is a little hobbit, man and woman. And they've only found 7 individuals. There's also Denisovan man, or Denisova hominin, found in Russia, and was only found in one site. This was, the last 2 were found in the 2000s, whereas pretty much everybody else had been found in the 19th and 20th century. Then finally, the red deer cave people, possibly Homo sapiens subspecies or hybrid, which was, again, in China, and only very few fossil records. And that particular one was found in 2012. So I think what this table illustrates more than anything else is the variety, both within our species as well as our supposed ancestors, as to height, volume, weight, and brain size. And it's important to understand that, because, again, our key argument, our foundation argument, is that ancient civilizations had attained at least a level of sophistication and technology equal to ours, if not higher. That's one of the key foundational arguments for the hypothesis. And if you look at that table, and you look at everybody's talking about brain capacity. I mean, there are fluctuations, but the greatest fluctuation are within our species that we can see. And you know what? If we found more examples of these supposed ancestors, we would find much more fluctuation. I mean, we're trying to get this from 15 guys, from one guy, you can't get a range from one individual. You can't get a range really from 7 individuals either. There might be like 15 individuals don't give you a good range. Do you know what I mean? So in order to get a good range, you need a good population sample, which we don't have for any of these, except for maybe for Neanderthal. And Neanderthal, on average, much larger brain capacity than us. Mm-hmm. So their bottom starts at 1200. Our bottom starts at 950. Their top levels out at 1900. Our top levels out at 1800. Okay, so they start from a better point and they end up higher. If you compare the two, just talking about brain size, that's it.
So Mackie, we're supposed to believe that they were particularly stupid, that we did coexist because the time frames meant that we coexisted as sapiens, because they're sapiens in the same tree. However, maybe if there was wars over the height of people, Mackie, maybe there was just wars over our differences. We don't know. We don't know. We've found, I mean, the Red Deer Cave people was one example, but there was another one where they've gone through dug down where there was a fireplace and dug down and found another fireplace, then another one and another one, another one. And in relative dating, where you date the soil next to where it is that you've dug up your artifact, they found discarded food bones from migratory animals and found that seasonally the cave was occupied by a different, either Neanderthal or sapiens.
Yeah.
So that in some part of the year, maybe they were winter people, maybe we were summer people. I don't know. But they found a very similar thing with the food. The food had changed and the habitation changed, and the teeth marks changed and the tools changed. So look, if we coexisted at one point, what a wonderful world we lived in.
Yeah.
If we're the ones who has less body hair and they had lots of body hair as depicted by, artists, maybe they were the ones who were more likely to be Bigfoot-esque. Maybe they didn't require all the things that we need, all the overheads that we need to survive in the wild. Maybe they did that more comfortably. Maybe they were more suited towards it. And these are some of the considerations that I throw into the mix, because you don't want to live somewhere you're not comfortable.
Well, that's it. But our species, I'm talking about Homo sapiens, or supposedly Homo sapiens. Mm-hmm. If you look at just things like body hair, I mean, there are people that have almost zero body hair, and there are people that cover in it, like fur, right? And no, in fact, there's a disorder that we have, with unfortunate people that have their entire head is covered in hair, like completely, like fur, right? Mm-hmm. So we do have the genetic switches for it. Okay, so I mean, this is the point again. I mean, where do you draw the line? I mean, you have to look at the bones. You can't go by the outer appearance. And sorry, that brings me to the next point here. I just want to quickly share this with you. And we've mentioned this. This is Homo tsaichengensis, rather, and it's a Pengu 1. It's a fossil jaw.
Pengu I gave 1. You a segue to that a bit earlier.
A mandible, in fact. I know. It's an extinct hominin species of the genus Homo from Taiwan, right? That is late Pleistocene. The fossil was recovered sometime before 2008 by fishermen working in the Pengu Channel between the Pengu Islands and mainland Taiwan, and described in 2015 by an international team of Japanese, Taiwanese, and Australian scientists. Pengu 1, and this is what I find hilarious, is estimated to be between 10,000 and 190,000 years old, because dating really works. So there's a 180,000 year range of anyway, whatever. The fossil consists of a nearly complete right lower jaw with 4 teeth, including molars and premolars. The specimen was assigned to the genus Homo based on jaw and tooth proportions, described as most similar to Haxian fossils of Homo erectus. But the species identity or taxonomic relationships lack consensus due to limited material. Co-author Yusuke Kaifu cautioned that additional skeletal parts are needed before species evaluation, but paleontologist Mark McMenamin argued that unique dental characteristics of the jaw were sufficient to establish the new species Homo saichangensis. Chinese anthropologists Jinji Wu and Hao Wentong tentatively assigned the mandible to archaic Homo sapiens, leaving open the possibility of elevating it to a distinct species should more fossils be discovered. In a 2015 paper, Lilo Suvat accepted the validity of the new species H. saichangensis. So the reason this is here is twofold. One, clearly dating is a huge issue. Secondly, though, we have just established a new species of Homo, if you will, based entirely on the lower left jaw. Sorry, lower right jaw. Mm-hmm. That's it. We just have a jaw, the lower, not the whole jaw, just the right part of it with a few teeth in it. I got a picture here. That was enough to establish a new species. So forgive me when I don't have the greatest of confidence in the Leakeys or anyone that looks at, ancient human remains and tells me, "Oh no, that's what happened. Shut up," because I'm the expert. I went to university. I live in Africa and I dig up these bones. Okay then. So let's be really clear. I'm not disrespecting people's work at all, right? But what I do want to caution is the almost godlike certainty that people seem to have when it comes to things like this. Dave, come on, Dave, come on, man. This is important stuff, and people just make these sweeping statements, right? And they go, "Oh no, you're wrong. You're completely wrong, Dave. Dave, you don't know what you're talking about." Blah blah blah. I mean, it's when sorry to do this to you, but it's when Dave talks about his experiences, right? And he's written a book, so I feel comfortable talking to you guys about it.
Yeah.
The only person that can make any judgment on that is Dave. Why is that? Because Dave experienced it. Oh, okay, but clearly I'm an expert on this. No, you're not an expert on Dave. You're not an expert on Dave's life, and you're certainly not an expert on what happened to him, unless you were there. Were you there? Oh, you were not there. Okay, so either Dave lies, so Dave is a liar, full stop, right? And that's a possibility. Or he's not. If he's not a liar, then either it actually happened or he's deluded. Okay, if he's deluded, okay, we put it over there. But if he's not deluded and he's not a liar, then it actually happened to him. So, Mr. Expert, where does that leave you? So that's really what we're dealing with here, guys, right? People.
I like when I was told I was wrong.
Right?
That's
You're
funny.
wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry. But that's insane, Dave, isn't it? I think it's insane to make those statements.
You. So Mekki, we've only got a couple of minutes before the top of the show. I'm just gonna announce now. Stay tuned after our show for a roundtable with Jer Bear. Dial in and follow the topics. Remember the talking stick though, so don't all talk over each other. What this is, Mekki, what this to me is, I think we don't have the full picture. I think we're watching it occur, and since we've been alive, I noticed some of the dates when we were looking back through the table. Some of these dates, 2012, 1921, 1829. There's a whole bunch of dates in here that suggest that we've been discovering this and continue to discover and are still perplexed by it. That's where the mystery is, and that's where I don't think we're 100% certain. And they're sort of, there's a gridded board in front of them and they're trying to put the pieces in there, and it's it's like doing a jigsaw with a blindfold on. And at the moment people are very presumptuous, attempting to fit that thing that we used to do, the evolution thing, and say, well, it's just a single line and here we go, and now there's a more like what looks like a shot